Imagine for a moment a world without Wi-Fi, without smartphones, without any of the instant connections we take for granted today. A world where sending a message across a continent could take months if it arrived at all. Now picture this. Even in that distant past, there existed a technology so advanced, so brilliantly simple, that it could send vital information hundreds of miles in less time than it takes to brew a pot of coffee. That technology was the ancient signal tower, and it formed the very first global communication network, linking empires, saving nations, and quietly shaping the course of human history from the shadows. These structures were the unsung heroes of their age, the silent sentinels that made the impossible feel routine, and today we are going to step inside their world to uncover how they did it. Think about what it must have taken to coordinate vast empires without any of our modern tools. How did a Roman emperor know within hours that his frontier was under attack? Or how did a Chinese dynasty respond to an invasion threat before the enemy even reached the gates? The answer lies in these ingenious towers, perched on hilltops and strung across deserts and coastlines like beads on a string, each one visible to the next, creating a chain of light and smoke that could leap across kingdoms in the blink of an eye. This was more than just an early warning system. It was a masterpiece of logistics, human cooperation, and raw innovation. A system so effective that its principles still echo in the digital networks we rely on today. In this video, we are going to journey back through time to explore these incredible structures from the ground up. We will decode the language of their signals, meet the dedicated operators who kept the network alive, and discover how they managed feats of communication that would challenge even some modern systems. We will travel from the Great Wall of China to the frontiers of the Roman Empire, from the Persian royal road to the Aegean coast, unraveling the secrets of the first information superhighway. So settle in and get ready to see the ancient world in a whole new light, because the story of these signal towers is not just about technology. It is about the timeless human drive to connect, to protect, and to overcome any obstacle in the pursuit of a shared future. But to truly grasp the sheer brilliance of these networks, we need to go back to the very beginning, to the moment this revolutionary idea first sparked. Before the intricate chains of towers were fully realized, communication over distance was a slow, perilous, and uncertain endeavor. Runners could be waylaid, messengers on horseback could succumb to fatigue or bandits, and smoke signals from a single point could only warn those immediately nearby. The fundamental limitation was simple yet profound. A message could only travel as fast as a human or animal could carry it, and its journey was fraught with risk. What if, instead of moving the message itself, you could simply make it visible, passing it from one high point to the next like a baton in a relay race of light? This was the audacious concept that gave birth to the first signal towers, transforming the way entire civilizations managed their affairs. Some of the earliest and most sophisticated examples emerged in ancient China, particularly during the Zhou and Han dynasties. Here, the primary driver was an existential need for security. With a constant threat of nomadic incursions from the north, the Chinese states began constructing beacon towers along their frontiers and later integrating them into the monumental Great Wall. These weren't just random watchtowers, they were purpose-built communication nodes. A sentinel spotting the dust cloud of an approaching army could light a pre-arranged signal, perhaps a single fire for a small force, or multiple columns of smoke for a full-scale invasion. This signal would then be instantly seen and replicated by the next tower in the chain, rippling across the landscape at the speed of sight. Within hours, the emperor in his distant capital could be mobilizing a response to a threat that was still days away from the heartland. This system turned a sprawling, vulnerable border into a connected, reactive shield. Simultaneously, on the other side of the known world, the Roman Empire was facing a similar logistical nightmare, but theirs was the challenge of governing a vast, multicultural territory. The famous Roman roads were marvels for moving legions and goods, but even they were too slow for urgent military dispatches. To secure their frontiers, the Romans engineered the limes, a system of fortified borders that included a continuous chain of stone signal towers. These towers, often spaced within visual range of each other, allowed a message about a barbarian raid on the Rhine to be relayed to a command center on the Danube in a matter of hours, not weeks. This network was the nervous system of the empire, enabling a centralized authority in Rome to project its power and maintain control over provinces thousands of miles away. It was a tool of pure administration, turning a collection of conquered lands into a cohesive, manageable state. Beyond the immediate needs of war and control, these nascent networks also served the quieter but equally vital engines of trade and governance. A signal tower near a busy port could alert merchants to the arrival of a valuable trade caravan or an incoming storm, allowing them to adjust their plans and mitigate losses. For regional governors, the ability to receive timely reports on harvests, tax collection, or civil unrest was invaluable for maintaining stability and order. The towers became the backbone of early statecraft, enabling a flow of information that was previously unimaginable. They shrank the known world, reducing the paralyzing uncertainty of distance and creating a new sense of connectivity. This wasn't just about sending a message faster. It was about building a more responsive, resilient, and intelligent society, one that could react to events with a speed that matched their urgency. But how did these early visionaries actually build a system capable of such a monumental task? The answer lies not just in the idea, but in the breathtaking execution transforming that idea into stone, timber, and fire. These signal towers were architectural marvels, meticulously engineered for one singular purpose: flawless communication across impossible distances. Their design was a masterclass in solving a complex puzzle, where every single element from the foundation to the peak was optimized for clarity, speed, and survival. The very first and most critical decision was location. Builders couldn't just choose any scenic hilltop. They needed a perfect line of sight to the next tower in the chain and the one before it. This required an intimate, almost artistic understanding of the local geography. Scouts and surveyors would have spent weeks, perhaps even months, traversing the landscape, identifying promontories, mountain ridges, and coastal cliffs that offered an unobstructed view. The ideal distance between towers was typically around 5 to 10 miles, the maximum range at which a clear smoke column by day or a bright fire by night could be reliably distinguished from the next station. In flatter terrain like deserts or plains, this often meant constructing taller towers to peak over the curvature of the earth, while in mountainous regions they could leverage natural elevations. The entire network was a carefully calculated web of visibility, each node painstakingly placed to ensure not a single link in the chain was broken. Once the perfect spot was found, construction could begin, and it was always a testament to using what was available. Builders were practical geniuses, sourcing materials directly from the surrounding environment to avoid the staggering cost and labor of long-distance transport. Along the rocky frontiers of the Roman Empire, this meant quarrying local stone, cutting and stacking it into formidable, square-based towers that could double as defensive strongholds. In ancient China, many beacon towers along the Great Wall were built from the same rammed earth and stone as the wall itself, creating a seamless and formidable architectural language. In forested areas or where stone was scarce, timber was the primary material, often combined with wattle and daub or brick. The goal was never unnecessary grandeur, it was enduring functionality. These structures had to withstand howling winds, torrential rains, blistering sun, and in some cases the occasional attack. Their rugged, no-frills construction speaks volumes about their purpose. They were tools, not monuments. The architecture itself was brilliantly purposeful. While designs varied across cultures and eras, most towers shared several key features. The base was typically solid and broad, providing stability against the elements. A narrow staircase or a series of footholds carved into the interior wall would lead up to the most important part, the elevated signaling platform. This was the command center, a flat roof or a raised wooden stage where the operator would work. Here, you'd find the hearth or brazier for generating fire and smoke, often with a specially designed pit or chamber to control the airflow and intensity of the flames. Many towers also featured a pulley system or a hoist to raise fuel and supplies from the ground, saving the signalers precious time and energy during an alert. But the ingenuity didn't stop at the signaling apparatus. Since these towers often operated in remote, inhospitable locations, many were designed as miniature fortresses capable of sustaining their small crew for extended periods. Smaller rooms built into the base or adjacent buildings served as storage for the most vital commodity, fuel. Operators maintained stockpiles of dry wood, straw, animal dung, or even pre-mixed chemical compounds designed to produce colored smoke. Some towers also included rudimentary living quarters, a simple room with a hearth for cooking and sleeping, allowing a team of 2 or 3 soldiers to remain on watch for weeks at a time. This self-sufficient design ensured the network was always manned and ready, regardless of how isolated the station might be. Perhaps the most impressive aspect of their construction was how builders proactively solved problems they knew the towers would face. To combat poor visibility from rain or fog, some systems developed acoustic backups like bells or horns, though their range was limited. To prevent a tower's own smoke from obscuring the operator's view, hearths were often strategically placed to carry the plume away from the sight line to the next tower. Maintenance was a constant, relentless duty. Teams would have been regularly tasked with repairing stonework eroded by wind, replacing rotted timber, and most importantly, constantly clearing the surrounding vegetation to ensure that an overgrown tree never broke the critical line of sight. This ongoing dedication to upkeep is what allowed these networks to function reliably for centuries, a silent tribute to the unnamed engineers and laborers whose diligence kept the empire's heartbeat strong. With the towers standing sentinel across the landscapes, the real magic happened not in the stone and mortar, but in the air above them. This was where a sophisticated, silent language of light and smoke came to life, a code that could convey complex information across hundreds of miles without a single shouted word or written scroll. The system's brilliance lay in its elegant simplicity and its ruthless efficiency, using the most fundamental elements, fire and air, to create a vocabulary understood by empires. During the bright daylight hours when a blazing fire might be lost against the glare of the sun, smoke was the medium of choice, but this was not just any smoke. Operators were masters of their craft, knowing precisely how to create a thick, towering column that could be seen for miles. They used specific fuels, often a mix of dry wood and straw, but sometimes incorporating animal dung or even pre-prepared packets of materials designed to produce a particular color or density. The most famous example comes from the beacon towers of the Great Wall of China, where the number of smoke columns conveyed the scale of the threat. A single, steady plume might signal the approach of a small raiding party, perhaps 100 enemy troops. But if the lookout saw a vast host on the horizon, he would immediately light the fuels for multiple fires, sending 3, 4, or even 5 distinct pillars of smoke into the sky. This simple numeric code allowed the command centers far to the rear to understand the severity of the situation at a glance and dispatch an appropriately sized response force, all before the enemy had even reached the outer defenses. When the sun went down, the language of the towers transformed. Under the cover of darkness, fire itself became the most powerful signal. A single bright flame could be seen over astonishing distances on a clear night, acting as a stark, urgent beacon. Here, coding became even more intricate. The Romans along their formidable frontiers, such as Hadrian's Wall, were known to use a system of multiple braziers or fire baskets hoisted on poles. The number of individual fires burning simultaneously could indicate different pre-arranged messages. One fire might mean all is quiet, while 2 could signal border patrol returning, and 3 blazing lights would scream enemy attack imminent. There is also compelling evidence that some cultures experimented with colored flames to add another layer of meaning to their nocturnal signals. By throwing certain salts or minerals onto the fire copper for a green flame, or potassium for a violet hue, a signaler could transform a simple alert into a more specific report, perhaps indicating the direction of the attack or the type of force approaching. Beyond simple fire and smoke, some civilizations developed even more advanced optical technologies. The ancient Greeks and Romans understood the principle of the heliograph, using highly polished bronze or silver shields to catch the sunlight and flash-coded signals to distant observers. While more limited by weather and the sun's position, this method offered a form of communication that was nearly instantaneous and completely silent, perfect for sending discreet messages without alerting anyone on the ground between the towers. A series of quick flashes might represent numbers or letters, while a sustained, steady beam could act as a simple attention getter before switching to a different method. This demonstrates the remarkable adaptability of these networks. They were not reliant on a single point of failure, but could employ a suite of signaling techniques depending on the time of day, weather conditions, and urgency of the message. The true sophistication, however, lay in the protocols that governed this language. It wasn't enough for a single tower to send a signal. The entire chain had to operate with flawless coordination to prevent a catastrophic miscommunication. A standard operating procedure would have been drilled into every operator. Upon seeing a signal from the adjacent tower, the watchman's first duty was to verify it. He would confirm the number of smoke puffs or fires, then immediately replicate the exact same signal himself to keep the message moving down the line. This created a wave of information flowing across the landscape. To acknowledge receipt or to signal that a message was understood, some systems used a reciprocal flash of light or a brief return smoke signal. This ensured that the originating tower knew its message had been received correctly and was being acted upon, creating a primitive but highly effective form of error checking that would be familiar to any modern network engineer. This intricate dance of light and observation turned isolated stone towers into nodes in a living, breathing information network, a nervous system for empires that allowed them to react to threats and opportunities with a speed that their enemies could scarcely comprehend. While the Chinese perfected their warning system against northern nomads, another ancient superpower was building an equally impressive network for a vastly different kind of empire. The Romans did not face a single, concentrated threat from one direction. Their challenge was the constant, simmering pressure along thousands of miles of frontier, from the misty highlands of northern Britain to the sun-baked deserts of Syria. To manage this incredible span, they developed the limes not just a simple wall or fence, but a sophisticated, multi-layered border system that integrated roads, forts, garrisons, and of course, signal towers into a seamless web of control. These towers were the nervous system of the limes, the critical component that transformed a static defensive line into a living, breathing, and reactive frontier. The sheer scale of this communication feat is almost difficult to grasp. Imagine a message originating from a watchtower on the banks of the Rhine River. A sentry spots a band of Germanic warriors testing the frontier. He doesn't have to dispatch a rider who would take days of dangerous travel to reach the nearest legionary fortress. Instead, he steps to the edge of the tower's platform and signals the next tower in the chain, perhaps 5 miles distant, using a pre-arranged code of fire or smoke. That tower's crew sees it, confirms it, and instantly relays the identical signal to the next one. This chain reaction continues, leaping from hilltop to hilltop, moving at the speed of sight. Within a few hours, that initial alert could have reached a command center on the Danube, allowing a general to mobilize cavalry and infantry from multiple forts to intercept the incursion long before it could penetrate deep into Roman territory. This speed of information was Rome's ultimate strategic weapon, allowing them to defend a massive empire with a surprisingly limited number of legions by making their force projection incredibly efficient. The physical layout of these towers was a masterpiece of practical military engineering. They were never placed at random. Roman surveyors, the agrimensors, meticulously charted the land to ensure each tower was within clear visual range of its neighbors, typically about 5 to 10 miles apart. The maximum distance a clear signal could be reliably seen under normal conditions. In densely forested areas like Germania, this often meant building taller timber towers or clearing large swaths of trees to create a clean sightline. In more open terrain, such as the deserts of North Africa or the plains of Pannonia, they could be lower stone structures. The towers themselves were functional and austere. A typical stone tower on Hadrian's Wall, for example, was a 2-story square structure. The ground floor was a secure storage room for supplies, accessed only by a ladder from the first floor, which was the living and duty space for the handful of auxiliary soldiers stationed there. A roof hatch led to the crucial signaling platform on the top, where the brazier was kept ready for immediate use. The men who manned these remote outposts were not the famed legionaries but auxiliary troops, often recruited from the very provinces they were guarding. A unit of Syrian archers might find themselves stationed on a windswept tower in northern Britain, a testament to the empire's complex logistics. Theirs was a life of profound isolation and relentless vigilance. The historian Tacitus, writing about the conditions on the frontier, captured the essence of their duty not with a grand quote about battle, but with a quieter observation on the psychological toll, describing the long watches and the constant, gnawing uncertainty of what might emerge from the wilderness. Their days were filled with mundane but vital tasks, maintaining their equipment, cleaning the tower, gathering fuel for the signal fire, and always scanning the horizon. A mistake, a misfired signal, a moment of inattention could have catastrophic consequences, costing lives and jeopardizing the security of an entire sector. Beyond just signaling attacks, these towers served as the logistical backbone of the frontier. They were observation points for monitoring peaceful traffic at designated crossing points, ensuring tariffs were paid and goods were documented. They could signal the approach of friendly supply convoys, allowing gates to be opened and Chinese letter parties prepared. In times of large-scale military movement, the tower network could coordinate the deployment of multiple legions across vast distances, turning disparate units into a cohesive fighting force. This constant flow of information, from routine reports to emergency alerts, allowed the Roman High Command to administer their border provinces with an efficiency that stunned their adversaries. The limes was not a barrier meant to utterly seal the empire off. It was a controlled filter, and the signal towers were the sensors that made that control possible, enabling Rome to project its power and maintain its dominance for centuries through the brilliance of communication as much as the strength of its swords. While the Roman limes exemplified a reactive, military-focused network, the system woven into the fabric of the Great Wall of China was something else entirely, a proactive, nation-saving early warning apparatus of breathtaking scale and sophistication. This wasn't just a chain of towers, it was a hierarchical, intelligent nervous system designed to protect an entire civilization from the existential threats that poured out of the northern steppes. The wall itself was a formidable physical barrier, but its true genius lay in the eyes of its beacon towers, which transformed it from a static wall into a sentient, reactive shield. The operational protocol was meticulously organized, reflecting a deep understanding of both technology and human psychology. At the most basic level, a single tower was manned by a small team of soldiers, their lives dedicated to vigilance. Their primary tool was a sophisticated code based on the most fundamental elements, smoke by day and fire by night, but this was no simple danger signal. The system used a precise numeric language to convey specific, actionable intelligence. According to historical records from the Tang dynasty, a single beacon fire signaled an enemy force of roughly 1,000 soldiers. 2 fires meant a contingent of around 3,000. 3 fires indicated 5,000, and 4 fires represented an invasion force of over 10,000, a truly dire emergency that threatened the stability of the entire region. This immediate, visual quantification of the threat allowed command centers dozens of towers away to understand the scale of the crisis without a single written dispatch, enabling them to mobilize a proportionate response instantly. But the system's intelligence didn't stop at counting enemy troops. It could also communicate the nature of the engagement and even the outcome of a battle. Some accounts describe codes that combine different signals. For instance, a single column of smoke accompanied by the firing of a cannon might indicate that a battle was underway and that the Chinese forces were holding their ground. If the tower was suddenly overrun, the defenders had one final, desperate protocol: to light what was known as a signal of utmost urgency, often involving creating an enormous, chaotic fire. This final act would tell the next tower in the chain not just that the enemy was here, but that this specific strongpoint had fallen, a critical piece of information for strategists planning a counterattack. This layered coding transformed simple fire and smoke into a rich, detailed language of war. The physical journey of a message was a marvel of coordinated timing. Imagine a sentry on a remote western tower spotting the dust cloud of a significant force. He immediately lights the 2 fires indicating 3,000 enemy troops. The crew at the next tower, perhaps 5 miles away, sees the distinct twin flames against the night sky. Their duty is not to interpret or question, but to verify and immediately replicate, lighting their own 2 fires within moments. This creates a wave of light that races across the mountain ridges and deserts. A message could leap from the distant frontier to the capital city of Chang'an, a distance of several hundred miles in a matter of just a few hours. By the time the invading army had even finished setting up its first camp, the emperor and his generals in the palace would already be analyzing the reported size of the force and issuing mobilization orders to the appropriate military districts. This speed gave the Chinese Empire a strategic advantage that was virtually unmatched in the ancient world. However, the beacon tower's role extended far beyond pure warfare, becoming a vital artery for the lifeblood of the empire, commerce and culture. The same network that sent warnings of danger could also be used to send all-clear signals, indicating that a stretch of the Silk Road was safe for travel. This assurance was invaluable for the merchants carrying silk, spices, and gems across the continent. A steady, single fire from a sequence of towers could signal to caravans that the route was secure from bandits or that a key mountain pass was open, effectively guiding trade and boosting the economic prosperity of the entire region. In this dual capacity, the towers embodied a fascinating paradox. They were instruments of war that simultaneously became facilitators of peace and cultural exchange, protecting not just borders but also the flow of ideas, goods, and people that defined the Silk Road era. This seamless integration of military defense and economic utility showcases a holistic view of statecraft that was centuries ahead of its time. Yet for all the defensive brilliance of the Roman and Chinese systems, another ancient superpower perfected a communication network that was arguably even more sophisticated in its purpose. The sprawling Persian Empire, under rulers like Darius I, faced a unique challenge, governing a vast, diverse realm that stretched from the Indus River to the Nile. Their legendary royal road was the physical backbone of this empire, a highway over 1,600 miles long that allowed mounted couriers to travel from one end to the other in just 7 days, a blistering pace for the ancient world. But even that incredible speed wasn't always enough. For truly urgent crises, a rebellion brewing in a distant satrapy, a surprise naval raid on the coast, a message needed to travel faster than even the swiftest horse. This is where the Persians demonstrated their true genius, not by choosing between couriers and signal towers, but by masterfully integrating both into a single, hybrid system that leveraged the unique strengths of each. The famed mounted couriers, immortalized by the Greek historian Herodotus in his description with the phrase, "Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds," were the carriers of detail. They were the empire's living, breathing scrolls. A courier would physically carry the official, often lengthy, missives from the king or a satrap. These documents could contain complex legal decrees, detailed tax records, thorough military orders, or diplomatic correspondence, the nuanced paperwork of empire that required absolute accuracy and could not be condensed into a simple smoke signal. These riders operated out of a network of way stations called chapar-khane, spaced a day's ride apart, where they could swap their tired horse for a fresh one, ensuring their message moved at a sustained gallop across the continent. The signal towers, often situated on high points overlooking the royal road or near these way stations, served as the system's nervous system for emergencies. Their role was not to replace the courier, but to supercharge him. Imagine a governor in the province of Lydia uncovering a plot against the king. He would dispatch a courier with a sealed scroll containing all the evidence, names, and recommended actions. But simultaneously, he would order the local signal tower to send a pre-arranged, abbreviated message down the line. A specific sequence of fire signals, perhaps 2 quick flames followed by a long, sustained one, might carry a simple, urgent meaning: treason in Sardes. This visual alert would race ahead of the physical courier at the speed of light, reaching the capital days before the rider ever could. This created a powerful synergy that modern logistics experts would admire. The fast-moving signal acted as a preliminary alert, putting the central government on immediate notice. By the time the courier arrived, exhausted but with his vital scroll intact, the court ministers and the king were already prepared. They had likely convened advisors, started gathering intelligence, and had preliminary plans drafted. The detailed message from the courier didn't arrive to a room of shocked, unprepared officials. It arrived to an active situation room, allowing for a response that was both incredibly swift and deeply informed. The signal provided the speed, and the courier provided the substance, a perfect marriage of urgency and detail. Furthermore, the towers could be used to directly assist the couriers themselves. A signal from one tower to the next could instruct a way station to have a fresh horse saddled and ready, shaving precious minutes off the messenger's changeover time. In extreme cases, a tower could signal ahead to mobilize a local garrison to clear the road of obstacles or provide an armed escort for the courier through a dangerous stretch of territory, ensuring the physical message security. This multimodal approach, blending the relentless endurance of a man on a horse with the instantaneous flash of fire across a mountaintop, gave the Persian emperors a level of control and responsiveness that was unprecedented. It was a system designed not just for war, but for the intricate daily management of a multicultural empire, proving that the most effective communication network is often not a single technology, but the intelligent integration of several. While the Persians mastered a hybrid system for their continental empire, the Byzantines faced a threat that moved not on horseback but on the waves. As the Eastern Roman Empire evolved, its greatest dangers shifted from land armies to naval fleets, particularly from the rising power of the Arab caliphates. To defend their wealthy capital of Constantinople, the Byzantines engineered one of the most specialized and rapid communication networks in history, a beacon system designed not for sprawling frontiers, but for the unique geography of the Aegean Sea. This was a network built for speed above all else, because when an enemy fleet was sighted, every single minute counted. The strategic challenge was immense. Arab fleets could launch from ports all along the Levantine coast, aiming to raid Byzantine islands or even lay siege to the capital itself. A message sent by ship to warn Constantinople could take days, arriving long after the enemy had already made landfall. The Byzantine solution was to create a chain of signal towers that formed a virtual tripwire across the entire Aegean. The primary line stretched from the Lidnites promontory on the Anatolian coast, leapfrogging across the islands of Leros, Kos, and Carpathos before finally reaching the island of Crete. From there, another branch could carry the warning north to the capital. This was not a simple straight line. It was a web of visibility meticulously calculated to cover the most likely invasion routes. The technological heart of this system was a significant innovation, a dedicated, standardized beacon apparatus, far more sophisticated than a simple open fire. Historical sources, including the later treatise of Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitos, describe a large iron basket or brazier mounted on a high pole on the tower's roof. This wasn't just for holding wood, it was designed for a specific, powerful fuel mix. The Byzantines likely used a combination of dry wood and resin-sold straw or pitch, materials that would ignite instantly and produce an intensely bright, tall flame that could be seen over vast maritime distances, even through the haze that often hangs over the sea. This guaranteed that the signal would be unmistakable against the dark expanse of water and the night sky, but a single bright light could only say one thing: danger. The Byzantines needed to convey more specific information, and evidence suggests they developed a basic but effective coding system. While the details are lost to time, it is widely believed by historians that they used a method involving multiple beacons or a way of obscuring and revealing the single flame. One theory posits that two fires burning simultaneously might indicate a large fleet, while a single fire signaled a smaller raiding party. Another suggests the use of a shutter or shield mechanism that could be quickly moved in front of the flame, creating a series of flashes, one for every 10 ships sighted, for instance. This would have provided command centers in Constantinople with crucial, actionable intelligence about the scale of the threat hurtling toward them. The efficiency of this network was nothing short of breathtaking. A message about a sighted enemy fleet could travel the entire length of the Aegean, a distance of over 400 miles, in less than 60 minutes. Imagine a lookout on a tower on the Anatolian coast spotting the distinct sails of an Arab dromon. His heart pounding, he would shout to his comrade, who would immediately torch the prepared fuel in the brazier. Within seconds, a tower on the horizon of the nearest island would see the sudden eruption of light. Their own beacon would blaze to life almost instantly. A Chinese letter of fire passed across the sea. This wave of light would race from island to island, each tower acting as a neuron firing in a colossal brain, until the signal flared atop the walls of Constantinople itself. The entire journey, a message traveling at the speed of light, took less time than it takes to complete a morning meal. This system was famously put to the ultimate test during the Arab sieges of Constantinople, particularly the Great Siege of 717 to 718. Historical accounts suggest that the beacon network provided the crucial early warning that allowed Emperor Leo III to prepare the city's formidable defenses. He had time to recall the fleet, stockpile supplies, and reinforce the mighty Theodosian walls. The Arab fleet, arriving expecting surprise, found a city fully armed and ready for a long fight, a stalemate that ultimately ended in a decisive Byzantine victory that preserved Christian Europe for centuries. The humble beacon towers, often overlooked in tales of Greek fire and mighty walls, were the unsung heroes that bought the empire the most precious commodity of war, time. They represent a perfect adaptation of an ancient land-based technology to a new maritime domain, proving that the principles of communication are timeless, even as the methods evolve to meet the challenges of a changing world. As the centralized power of Rome fractured and the Byzantine Empire focused its energies eastward, the torch of communication technology was not extinguished but passed to a new, more fragmented Europe. The grand imperial networks gave way to a patchwork of local systems, each tailored to the unique and often brutal realities of the feudal age. Here, the signal tower shed its identity as a tool of empire and was reborn as an instrument of local survival, woven into the very fabric of medieval life within the stone walls of castles and the secluded cloisters of monasteries. This adaptation to a decentralized world reveals a fascinating evolution where the need for connection persisted even as the scale of power shrank dramatically. Within the complex hierarchy of feudal society, a lord's power was measured not just by the number of knights he could command, but by the speed with which he could summon them. Isolated stone castles, while formidable, were vulnerable if caught unaware. This is where the castle's tower, its highest point, became far more than a symbol of authority. It was a vital communications hub. Networks of these fortifications, often within the fiefdom of a single powerful lord or a strategic alliance between neighbors, maintained lines of sight to one another. The system operated on a principle of mutual defense. If a sentry on the battlements of one castle spotted the smoke of a burning village or the glint of armor from an approaching raiding party, he would not wait for a rider. Instead, he would signal immediately. By day, this might involve a large, pre-arranged flag pattern or a distinctive column of smoke from a specially prepared fire. By night, it was almost always the urgent, unmistakable language of fire. A single beacon flame blazing from the tower top was a universal cry for help, a visual scream that would be instantly recognized by the next castle in the chain. Perhaps the most famous and enduring example of this feudal signaling is found along the volatile border between England and Scotland. For centuries, this was a land of constant raid and counter-raid, where the threat of a Scottish incursion was a daily fact of life for northern English lords. To counter this, they established sophisticated beacon chains linking major strongholds like Bamberg Castle, Dunstanburgh Castle, and others. The protocol was deadly serious. The sighting of a Reactive party, the notorious border raiders, would trigger a cascade of fire from hilltop to hilltop, from castle to village, until the entire countryside was alert. This warning gave people precious minutes to flee to safety behind castle walls or into fortified towns, saving lives and livestock from pillage. The system was so integral to border life that its legacy is permanently etched into the landscape. Countless hills across England and Scotland are still named Beacon Hill, a silent testament to the fires that once burned there as a warning of approaching danger. But the medieval world was not solely defined by martial lords and their knights. In an age of instability, the monastery served as a rare bastion of learning, spirituality, and astonishingly economic enterprise. These religious communities, often wealthy with land and treasures donated by the faithful, were themselves prime targets for Viking longships, bandits, or even rival lords. Consequently, many great abbeys were built as fortified complexes, and their bell towers or dedicated watchtowers became the nerve centers of their own localized communication networks. The purpose here was dual. The most obvious was defense. A monk on watch duty would signal the approach of any potential threat, allowing the community to secure its gates and protect its sacred relics and libraries. Yet, these monastic signals also served a more peaceful, rhythmic purpose, coordinating the daily life of the community according to the strict divine office, the canonical hours of prayer that structured the monastic day. The sound of a bell might signal the call to matins at dawn or vespers in the evening, but for dependent farms or smaller priories located at a distance, a visual signal was often necessary. A flag flown from the tower or a specific smoke signal at a certain time could indicate the hour for prayer or for communal meals, synchronizing the activities of a dispersed religious family. This blending of the sacred and the practical extended even to the surrounding lay community. A distinctive signal from the abbey tower might warn local farmers of an approaching storm, call them to mass on a holy day, or even summon them to help bring in the harvest, transforming the monastery into a benevolent hub of information for the entire region. The architecture of these medieval towers perfectly reflected their multifunctional role. Unlike the stark, military-only towers of the Roman limes, a medieval castle keep or monastic bell tower was a vertical village. The lower floors housed storerooms, kitchens, and living quarters. The middle levels might contain the Lord's Hall or the scriptorium where monks copied manuscripts. Only at the very top, on the roof or a special platform, was the signaling apparatus located. This design meant the tower was always occupied, always alive with activity, ensuring that the duty of watchfulness could be maintained around the clock by its inhabitants. The person responsible for the signal was not a specialized soldier but a member of the community, a knight taking his turn on watch, a lay brother assigned duty, or a monk fulfilling his horarium. This ingrained the communication system into the daily rhythm of medieval life, making it as essential as baking bread or tending fields, a fundamental thread in the fabric of survival and order in a tumultuous age. Yet behind every flawless relay of light and smoke, every life-saving alert that raced across the empire, stood a figure we have scarcely mentioned until now, the operator. These men were the human heartbeat of this vast technological network, the sentinels whose unwavering vigilance transformed an ingenious system from a mere concept into a living, breathing reality. We often marvel at the stone towers that still dot the landscapes, but it is the story of the people who manned them that truly completes the picture, reminding us that the most advanced technology is ultimately powerless without the dedication of those who make it work. Consider for a moment the sheer weight of responsibility placed upon their shoulders. A single moment of inattention, a glance away from the horizon, a misidentified signal, a poorly maintained fire could cascade into catastrophe. A missed warning could mean an undefended village laid to waste, a surprise attack on a legion, or a king caught unaware by rebellion. There were no second chances, no Control-Z to undo an error. The operator's duty was one of absolute precision, a role that demanded not just physical endurance but unshakable mental fortitude. In the Roman army, for instance, a soldier assigned to a frontier watchtower was chosen for his reliability and keen eyesight. His pay and station might have been humble, but the consequence of his failure was anything but. He understood that the security of the entire sector and the lives of his fellow soldiers in the forts behind him rested on his alertness. This immense psychological pressure, the constant burden of knowing that a mistake could cost lives, must have been a heavy cloak to wear during those long, lonely watches. Their daily existence was a masterclass in monotony punctuated by moments of sheer terror. A typical watch might last for 8 to 12 hours, a stretch of time filled with the hypnotic rhythm of scanning the horizon in a slow, methodical arc. The tools of their trade were simple but vital. Beyond the main signaling brazier, an operator would maintain a smaller, constantly burning fire, a pilot light, in essence, to ensure the main signal could be ignited instantly without fumbling with flint and steel. His most important asset was his fuel, meticulously maintained stockpiles of dry wood, straw, and tinder, often stored in a dry room at the tower's base to protect it from the elements. In some Chinese towers, archaeologists have found ceramic pots containing residues of sulfur and saltpeter, suggesting the use of pre-mixed chemical compounds designed to create a specific colored or particularly dense smoke on demand. The operator was in many ways a chemist, a meteorologist, and a firekeeper, all rolled into one. And then there was the isolation. Many of these towers were positioned in the most remote and inhospitable places imaginable: wind-lashed coastal cliffs, barren mountain peaks, desolate desert outposts. A crew might consist of only 2 or 3 men, stationed together for months at a time with little more than each other and the howling wind for company. The archaeological remains of some Roman signal towers on the British frontier reveal a glimpse of this stark life: a small hearth for cooking, a storage jar for grain or water, and a collection of simple gaming pieces carved from bone or stone. These tiny artifacts speak volumes about the strategies these men used to combat boredom and maintain their sanity during the long stretches between signals. They would have told stories, played games, maintained their gear, and stared endlessly at an empty landscape, their senses perpetually tuned for the one thing they both dreaded and were trained to expect: the flicker of a distant flame that would shatter the silence and catapult them into a whirlwind of action. When that moment finally arrived, their training took over. The protocol was drilled into them relentlessly. The first man to spot the signal would call out, not in panic, but with a clear, standardized report. The team would then verify it together, confirming the number of fires or smoke columns to eliminate any possibility of misreading a cooking fire or a trick of the light. Then, with practiced efficiency, they would execute their part. One man might feed the main brazier with the specific fuel mix for the required signal, while another used a bellows or a shield to shape the smoke column or intensify the flame. Speed was critical, but so was accuracy. A misread signal replicated and sent down the line would send the entire empire mobilizing for the wrong threat, wasting precious resources and leaving the real danger unaddressed. Theirs was a profession that prized calmness under pressure above brute strength. These operators, whose names are almost entirely lost to history, were the essential cogs in a magnificent machine. They were the ones who endured the biting cold, the sweltering heat, the rain that obscured their view, and the fog that isolated them even further. They fought off fatigue, boredom, and fear to keep the channels of communication open. The glorious general receiving the timely warning in his command tent, the emperor making a strategic decision in his palace. Their success was built upon the foundation of these unsung heroes performing their duty perfectly in a lonely stone tower on the edge of the known world. Their story is a powerful testament to a universal truth that the most brilliant system ever devised is only ever as strong as the commitment and character of the people tasked with its operation. But with such a powerful and visible system carrying the most sensitive information across empires, a critical problem emerged. How do you prevent an enemy from understanding your signals just as clearly as your own troops? After all, a column of smoke or a blazing fire is visible to everyone within line of sight, friend and foe alike. The solution was a brilliant fusion of simplicity and ingenuity, the birth of military cryptography in the ancient world. These early engineers of information security realized that the message itself didn't need to be hidden. It was the meaning behind it that had to be locked away, accessible only to those who held the key. They transformed their open-air networks into secure channels by developing sophisticated codes and ciphers, turning a public display of light into a private conversation between towers. The most common and effective method was the use of non-standardized codes, a system where the meaning of a signal was agreed upon in advance and changed regularly. Imagine a Roman watchtower operator on the German frontier. His military manual wouldn't simply say, 3 fires means enemy attack. That would be disastrous if the local Germanic tribes learned the code. Instead, the code might change with the seasons or the phases of the moon. One month, 3 fires could indeed mean an enemy attack, but the next month, the pre-arranged codebook might dictate that 3 fires actually signaled the successful arrival of a supply convoy, while a single fire followed by 2 quick ones indicated a skirmish. This practice of frequently altering the cipher key is a fundamental principle of modern cryptography, and it was being used on Hadrian's Wall 2,000 years ago. The secret wasn't in the signal itself, but in the codebook held by the commander at the next fort, making the message useless to any observer who didn't have the current key. We have tantalizing evidence of this from Roman military texts. While no complete codebook has survived, writings from generals and historians hint at the protocols. They reference the use of claves or keys that would be distributed along the frontier, and they emphasize the importance of changing these signals to avoid the enemy becoming familiar with them. A Germanic scout might see 3 fires every time a Roman patrol returned, deducing the pattern. But if the meaning of those 3 fires changed unpredictably, his intelligence became worthless. This constant game of cryptographic cat and mouse required discipline and coordination all along the line, ensuring every tower operator was working from the same, updated set of instructions to avoid catastrophic miscommunication. In ancient China, the coding systems reached an even higher level of complexity and nuance. Historical texts from the Tang dynasty describe the beacon towers along the Great Wall using a multi-layered system of signals. It wasn't just about the number of fires, it was about combinations and sequences. For instance, a single fire accompanied by the release of a single red lantern might indicate infantry sighted, while that same single fire paired with a red and a blue lantern could specify cavalry. Another method involved the type of smoke produced. By burning different materials in the signal fire, perhaps wolf dung for a white smoke, a specific mix of straw and resin for a black smoke, they could add another variable to the code. An alert might be defined as 2 columns of white smoke and 1 fire, meaning one thing, while 1 column of black smoke and 3 fires meant something completely different. This expanded the vocabulary of the system exponentially, allowing for a much richer and more detailed message to be sent visually. The need for secrecy sometimes went beyond just codes and ventured into the realm of deception, a practice known as steganography, or hiding a message in plain sight. There are accounts, though somewhat legendary, of Chinese generals using seemingly innocent actions to convey secret plans. One famous story tells of a general who received a gift of a fresh fish from a colleague. To everyone else, it was just a gift, but the general, understanding their pre-arranged code, knew that the word for fish sounded like the word for surplus in their dialect. He interpreted the message to mean he now had a surplus of troops and should attack. While this particular tale might be apocryphal, it illustrates the creative mindset of the time. Any medium could be used to carry a hidden message, and the most effective secret was one that didn't look like a secret at all. This ancient drive for secure communication laid the essential groundwork for everything that followed. The fundamental problem they solved, how to transmit information publicly while keeping its meaning private, is the very same challenge that underpins modern digital encryption, from secure websites to private messaging apps. Their solutions, based on shared keys and complex substitutions, are the direct ancestors of the algorithms that protect our data today. They proved that security isn't about building taller walls around a message, but about making the message itself incomprehensible to anyone without the permission to understand, a concept that has remained remarkably unchanged for millennia, even as the methods have evolved from smoke signals to silicon chips. Yet the core principles of those ancient networks, line of sight transmission, relay stations, and sophisticated coding, refused to fade into obsolescence. They simply lay dormant, waiting for a new age of innovation to reawaken and refine them. That resurgence arrived not in the dusty corridors of a forgotten empire, but in the vibrant, tumultuous atmosphere of 18th century France, a nation in the throes of revolution and desperate for a communication system as fast as its changing ideals. The result was the optical telegraph, a direct and breathtakingly elegant descendant of the smoke and fire signals, proving that a brilliant idea, when given the right tools, can evolve into something world-changing. The mastermind behind this leap forward was a French inventor named Claude Chappe. Along with his 4 brothers, he sought to create a system that could send complex messages across the country with unprecedented speed. His brilliant insight was to replace the ambiguous language of flame with a precise mechanical alphabet. He developed a large, horizontal wooden beam called a regulator, which was fitted at each end with 2 smaller articulated arms known as indicators. By using a system of pulleys and levers operated from inside a small shelter at the base of the tower, an operator could position these arms into hundreds of distinct configurations. Each configuration represented a specific number or code. From a distance, the entire apparatus looked like a giant, skeletal black bird against the sky, its angular positions clearly visible through a telescope. This was the semaphore, a word derived from the Greek for bearer of signs, and it transformed visual signaling from a simple warning system into a true language capable of conveying any message, from a battlefield command to a parliamentary decree. Chappe's system was a masterpiece of network design that would have felt intimately familiar to a Roman engineer, yet it was supercharged with Enlightenment precision. The French government, quickly recognizing its immense potential, commissioned the first line between Paris and Lille, a distance of over 200 kilometers. They constructed a chain of stations, each typically spaced 10 to 15 kilometers apart, a distance determined by the limits of telescopic visibility and the local terrain. Each station was a tower topped with the semaphore apparatus, manned by a trained operator who would spend his days with a telescope trained on the previous station in the chain. Upon seeing its arms move into a new position, his only job was to replicate that exact configuration on his own machine, sending the message racing down the line to the next watchful operator. A message could travel the entire 200 kilometers from Lille to Paris in a matter of minutes, a speed that was nothing short of magical for the era. The coding system used was a direct intellectual heir to the cryptographic methods of the ancient world, but far more advanced. Chap understood that trying to create a unique signal for every single word would be impossibly cumbersome. Instead, he developed a complex codebook. Each distinct semaphore position corresponded to a number. That number would then be cross-referenced in a codebook that listed pages, lines, and words. For example, the signal for the number 140 might point to page 140 in the book, line 10, word 4, which could be the word reinforcements. This layered system allowed a seemingly simple numeric signal to transmit highly specific and complex information with perfect security, as the codebooks were kept strictly confidential. It was a system of immense sophistication, a fusion of mechanical engineering and information theory that served France for over half a century, even being adopted by other nations like Sweden and Russia. The parallels between Chap's semaphore lines and the ancient beacon networks are profound and illuminating. Both systems were utterly dependent on the vigilance of human operators working in remote, isolated towers. Both were vulnerable to the same ancient enemies, fog, rain, and darkness, which could bring the entire network to a grinding halt, and both served the same core purpose for the state, the rapid consolidation of power and control over vast distances. Where a Roman emperor used his towers to coordinate legions, the French government used its semaphore to dispatch administrative orders and quell regional unrest with stunning speed. Yet the optical telegraph also represented a quantum leap in capability. It was the final and most advanced form of purely optical communication, the pinnacle of a technology that began with a wisp of smoke on a distant hill. Its success paved the intellectual way for the next great revolution. The invention of the electric telegraph in the 19th century didn't just improve upon the optical system, it made it obsolete overnight. Wires carried messages through copper and weather, unaffected by darkness or storm, at the speed of electricity itself. The towers were abandoned and the semaphore arms fell still. But the fundamental concept of a networked relay system, the very architecture of nodes passing information along a chain, had been proven on an industrial scale. The electric telegraph, and later the telephone, radio, and internet, did not emerge from a vacuum. They were built upon the operational logic, the coding principles, and the very ambition first hammered into reality by the builders of stone towers and perfected by the Chap brothers. The ancient signalers had lit a fuse of innovation that burned for centuries, culminating in a network of wires and waves that now encircles the globe, a permanent testament to humanity's unending quest to speak across the void. Yet for all their ingenuity in design and coding, the builders of these networks faced an adversary even more formidable than any invading army, the relentless and unforgiving face of the Earth itself. The entire premise of their system, instantaneous visual communication, rested on one non-negotiable requirement: an unobstructed line of sight from one tower to the next. This single necessity turned geography from a mere backdrop into the central character in the story, a force that could enable or utterly defeat their most ambitious plans. The placement of every single tower was therefore the result of an intense, high-stakes negotiation with the landscape, a testament to the ancient world's profound understanding of topography, environmental science, and sheer creative problem-solving. In mountainous regions, the challenge was a paradox of both opportunity and complication. High peaks and ridges offered commanding views, but they also created a jagged, irregular skyline that could easily block the view to the next valley. Builders couldn't simply choose the highest peak. They had to find a specific point that could both see the previous station and be seen by the next one in the sequence. This often meant constructing towers not on the absolute summit, but on a strategic shoulder or spur of a mountain that provided the crucial sightline. In the incredibly rugged terrain of ancient Persia, for instance, engineers navigating the Zagros Mountains had to account for deep gorges and sudden cliffs. Their solution was a combination of meticulous surveying and adaptive construction. They would sometimes build a series of smaller, intermediate towers on lower foothills to act as step-up relays, painstakingly bouncing a signal from one level to another until it cleared a major mountain range. The effort involved in hauling stone, timber, and supplies to these remote and dizzying heights is almost unimaginable, speaking to the immense value placed on this communication capability. Conversely, the vast, open expanses of deserts presented a completely different set of obstacles. In places like the North African frontier of the Roman Empire or the arid stretches of the Silk Road, the primary enemy was not obstruction but the curvature of the earth itself. On a perfectly flat plain, even a tall tower's signal would eventually disappear over the horizon. The Romans, in their efforts to monitor the coastlines for pirate activity and secure their African provinces, mastered the art of overcoming this flatness. Their solution was twofold. First, they built exceptionally tall towers, sometimes reaching over 15 meters in height, to maximize their visible range. Second, they employed a technique using highly polished bronze or silver shields as heliographs. The reflection of the sun from these mirrors created a brilliant, focused beam of light that could be seen at much greater distances than a simple smoke signal, effectively extending the range of each tower across the featureless landscape. This adaptation shows a sophisticated grasp of optics, using the intense desert sun not as a hindrance but as a powerful tool. Forested and heavily vegetated areas introduced a more dynamic and persistent threat. A tower perfectly placed one year could become useless a decade later as trees grew and saplings matured into a dense canopy that blocked the view. This demanded not just initial construction but a long-term commitment to maintenance. For networks like those in Germania or parts of Britain, a significant part of the garrison's duty would have been the relentless physical work of deforestation. Teams would be regularly sent out to clear wide swaths of land around each tower, creating a permanent buffer zone of visibility. This was backbreaking, constant labor, a battle against nature that had to be fought year after year. In some cases, rather than fighting the forest, builders would integrate a tower into a massive, ancient tree, building a platform high in the branches, or would construct their towers on stilts to peer over the top of the woodland canopy. These solutions reveal a pragmatic flexibility and willingness to work with the environment rather than always imposing their will upon it. Perhaps the most ingenious adaptations emerged where the networks met the sea. For the Byzantines, whose Aegean beacon system we discussed, the challenge was signaling across large bodies of water where no land was available for an intermediate tower. Their solution was to use the geography of islands as natural stepping stones, creating a hopscotch chain across the sea. but even this required incredible precision. The towers on these islands had to be positioned on the highest coastal cliffs and often incorporated massive, concentrated fires that used resinous woods and tar to create a smoke that was thick enough to be seen against the shimmering haze of the water, or a flame so intense it could punch through the pre-dawn gloom. The signal itself became a specialized tool, engineered for maximum contrast against a maritime backdrop. This deep understanding of how light and atmosphere behave over water shows an empirical knowledge that was centuries ahead of formal scientific understanding. Each tower placement was a data point in a vast, unconscious experiment in environmental physics, each successful relay a confirmation of their theories about the world. The silent, enduring stones of these towers are not just monuments to military strategy. They are the earliest textbooks of applied geography, written across the landscape itself. Yet for all their vital role in war and defense, to view these towers solely as instruments of conflict is to miss half of their profound legacy. They were not just the nervous system of empires at war. They were the circulatory system of civilizations at peace, pumping the lifeblood of commerce, culture, and diplomacy across continents with a speed that fostered a kind of ancient globalization. The very same flames that warned of invasion could also herald the arrival of a wealthy trade caravan, and the smoke that signaled a call to arms could also announce a royal birth or a major religious festival, transforming these networks into multifaceted tools that shaped the cultural and economic destiny of the ancient world. Consider the experience of a merchant on the legendary Silk Road, preparing to lead his camels laden with silk and spices through the treacherous Hexi corridor in western China. For him, the beacon towers standing sentinel on the mountain passes were not ominous symbols of war but beacons of immense economic opportunity. Before setting out, he would anxiously watch the towers for the all-clear signal, perhaps a steady, single column of smoke indicating that the route was free from bandits and the weather was fair for travel. This simple signal drastically reduced the paralyzing uncertainty that was the greatest cost of long-distance trade. It meant he could commit his entire fortune to the journey with greater confidence, knowing the road ahead was secure. Conversely, if the towers relayed a signal of unrest, he could hold his caravan back, avoiding catastrophic losses and waiting for a more favorable report. This flow of information effectively de-risked commerce, encouraging more trade, stabilizing prices, and making exotic goods from distant lands more accessible and affordable for everyone, from nobles to commoners. The towers didn't just move messages, they moved markets. This economic function extended seamlessly into the realm of logistics and hospitality. A signal from a distant tower announcing the approach of a large, well-known trade caravan was a powerful economic stimulus for a town or a Silk Road oasis. It gave the local innkeepers time to prepare rooms and stables, markets could stock extra food and water, and porters could be assembled for hire. For the rulers who controlled these territories, the towers provided advance notice to have tax collectors ready at the gates, ensuring tariffs and duties were efficiently collected on valuable goods. This pre-planned reception smoothed the entire process of trade, making cities along these routes more prosperous and efficient hubs. The signal towers, therefore, acted as a kind of ancient logistical software, optimizing the flow of goods and people across thousands of miles and integrating disparate economies into a more cohesive, interdependent whole. Beyond the movement of goods, these networks were indispensable for the delicate and often perilous art of diplomacy. In an age without embassies or instant communication, an envoy from a distant kingdom traveled with a constant cloud of uncertainty. Was the ruler he was approaching in a receptive mood? Had there been a coup? Was the kingdom even at peace? the signal towers could provide answers to these questions long before the diplomat ever reached the capital. A pre-arranged signal could announce the safe arrival and positive reception of one diplomatic party, encouraging others to follow. More poignantly, they could be used to signal major state events that had international ramifications. The death of a king, the coronation of a new emperor, or the birth of an heir, events that could shift alliances and redefine foreign policy, could be communicated to neighboring states in a matter of hours instead of weeks. This speed allowed for a more stable and predictable international environment, as rulers could adjust their strategies and send their own envoys with congratulations or condolences with unprecedented speed, fostering a sense of connection and mutual awareness between powerful states that helped to prevent misunderstandings and conflicts born of ignorance. Perhaps most beautifully, the towers facilitated the exchange of something even more valuable than silk or silver: ideas. The rapid transmission of information along these routes meant that news of intellectual and cultural breakthroughs could travel almost as fast as people did. A new philosophical text composed in Athens, a groundbreaking astronomical observation made in Babylon, or a new artistic technique developed in Persia could ripple across the known world, inspiring thinkers and artists in distant lands. The towers enabled a cultural synchrony that was previously impossible. Major religious festivals could be coordinated across vast regions, with signals marking the beginning of a celebration, so that people from the Mediterranean to the Indus Valley could feel connected in a shared experience, even if they were thousands of miles apart. This constant, low-level hum of information exchange helped to create a more cosmopolitan ancient world, where cultural isolation became harder to maintain, and where the greatest achievements of humanity could become, for the first time, a shared inheritance. The signal towers, in their quiet, fiery language, did not just protect borders, they helped to dissolve them, weaving a tapestry of human connection that laid the foundational threads for the interconnected world we know today. Beyond their stark military utility and their role as economic lifelines, the signal towers embedded themselves into the very soul of human culture, becoming powerful symbols that echoed through our myths, legends, and greatest works of literature. They transcended their physical form as piles of stone and became vessels for our deepest fears, our capacity for deception, and our longing for connection in a vast and often lonely world. These stories, passed down through generations, reveal that we have always understood the double-edged nature of communication itself, a tool that can save a kingdom or destroy it, depending on the hands that wield it. One of the earliest and most poignant examples of this duality comes from ancient Greek mythology, woven into the epic conclusion of the Trojan War. As the story goes, after 10 years of grueling siege, the Greeks finally resorted to cunning, constructing the infamous wooden horse and hiding their best warriors inside. To coordinate the final attack, they devised a complex signal system. The plan was for the warrior Sinon to light a beacon fire on the Trojan shore, a single flame that would be seen by the main Greek fleet waiting behind the nearby island of Tenedos. This fire was the all clear, the signal that the horse had been taken inside the city walls and the Trojans were celebrating, unaware and vulnerable. The myth captures the terrifying power of a single, pre-arranged light. It was not a call for help, but a call to annihilation, turning the fundamental concept of the warning beacon on its head. That fire did not save Troy. It doomed it, illustrating from the very dawn of storytelling that the medium itself is neutral, its morality defined entirely by the intent behind it. A strikingly similar theme, but with even graver consequences, emerges from Chinese folklore surrounding the beautiful but infamous Bao Si, concubine of King Yu of the Zhou dynasty. The legend tells of a king so besotted with his melancholy mistress that he would do anything to earn a smile from her. In a fateful and foolish moment, he ordered the emergency beacon fires to be lit, summoning his feudal lords and their armies from across the land to the capital for a false alarm. The sight of the powerful nobles arriving breathless and armored, only to find there was no threat and that they had been summoned for a royal jest, finally made Bao Si laugh. The king, delighted by his success, repeated this deception several times. The story concludes with a real invasion finally occurring. When the king frantically ordered the beacons lit once more, the lords, believing it to be another cruel joke, ignored the signals. The capital was sacked, the king was killed, and the Western Zhou dynasty fell. This tale is a masterclass in the consequences of miscommunication and the erosion of trust. It uses the signal tower not as a prop of war, but as a central character in a moral fable about responsibility, crying wolf, and how the abuse of a communication system for personal amusement can lead to the collapse of an entire civilization. As centuries passed, the symbolic weight of these structures only grew heavier in the hands of poets and playwrights. William Shakespeare, that unparalleled master of human emotion, used the image of the watchtower to evoke a profound sense of isolation and yearning in his tragedy Othello. When the Moorish general Othello is wrongly convinced of his wife Desdemona's infidelity, he equates his own torment to that of a lonely sentinel. He speaks of being on the watchtower of the people's hearts, a powerful metaphor for a leader who feels utterly alone in his duty, disconnected from those he commands and from the woman he loves. He is the ultimate isolated operator, seeing a threat, a false signal that no one else can perceive, and his resulting actions lead to tragedy. Shakespeare understood that the tower was more than a building. It was a state of mind, representing the terrifying isolation of power and the paranoia that can fester when one is disconnected from the warmth of human community. This literary tradition has continued unabated into the modern era, where novelists and filmmakers have found new resonance in the ancient form of the signal tower. In J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, the beacon towers of Gondor are among the most iconic and emotionally charged scenes in the entire epic. When the steward Denethor finally, reluctantly, gives the order to light the beacons and call for aid from Rohan, it is a moment of desperate hope. The camera in the film adaptation sweeps across the majestic White Mountains as one great fire after another bursts into life on the peaks, a visual symphony of light calling out across the wilderness. This sequence masterfully captures the original purpose of the historical networks, a swift, visual cry for help, but infuses it with immense emotional weight, representing the last, best hope of a kingdom on the brink of annihilation. It is a perfect fusion of ancient technology and timeless narrative power. In more introspective modern works, the tower often shifts from a symbol of communal defense to one of individual psychological isolation. Authors use settings like remote lighthouse outposts or lonely firewatch stations as backdrops for stories about characters grappling with their inner demons, cut off from the world they are supposed to be monitoring. The tower becomes a crucible for the soul, a place where the noise of society falls away and only the essential self remains, for better or worse. This evolution in their symbolic meaning shows how these ancient structures continue to provide a powerful framework for exploring contemporary anxieties about technology, connectivity, and the sometimes overwhelming need to simply disconnect and look inward. From the deceitful fire that burned for Troy to the hopeful flames of Gondor, the signal tower has proven to be one of storytelling's most enduring and versatile symbols, a silent stone sentinel that continues to whisper powerful truths about honor, trust, and the immense weight of the messages we choose to send. For centuries, the true story of these signal networks existed only in faded historical texts and local legends, their physical footprints slowly being reclaimed by the earth. It is only through the meticulous work of archaeology that we have been able to pull these stories from the soil, transforming myth into history and speculation into fact. Each excavation is like putting together a massive, continent-spanning jigsaw puzzle where most of the pieces are still missing, and every shard of pottery, every layer of ash, adds a crucial detail to our understanding of how these ancient internets truly functioned. One of the most fertile grounds for this discovery has been Hadrian's Wall in northern England. Here, the cold, wet climate and the remote, wind-swept landscape have preserved a breathtakingly clear picture of Roman military communication. Excavations of the mile castles and turrets along the wall have uncovered the literal fuel for the system: thick, stratified layers of charcoal and ash within the remains of stone hearths, confirming the use of fire as the primary nighttime signal. But perhaps the most evocative finds are the small, everyday objects that speak to the lives of the operators. Archaeologists have recovered pieces of delicate Samian ware pottery, fragments of glass bottles that once held wine or oil, and countless hobnailed sandals from the soldiers who paced these platforms. Most tellingly, they've found gaming pieces carved from bone and stone, simple dice and tokens used to pass the long, lonely hours between signals. These aren't just artifacts, they are intimate portraits of the men who served here, reminding us that the network was powered by human endurance and boredom as much as by fire and code. On the other side of the world, in the arid expanse of China's Gobi Desert, a different preservation miracle has been taking place. The extreme dryness of the environment has effectively freeze-dried entire beacon towers and their contents for over 2,000 years. Excavations along the Han Dynasty extensions of the Great Wall have yielded discoveries that read like an inventory list from an ancient signal manual. In the ruins of watchtowers, archaeologists have found intact signal bowls, large ceramic pots that were likely used to create smoke signals by burning a specific mix of fuels. More astonishingly, they've uncovered bundles of pre-prepared firewood, still neatly stacked and waiting to be used, and heaps of dried wolf dung, a material known to produce a thick, dense smoke ideal for daytime signaling. These are not just random piles of debris, they are the surviving stockpiles of the system's essential infrastructure, left behind in a sudden retreat and preserved perfectly, waiting for modern eyes to understand their purpose. The real detective work begins when archaeologists take these physical clues and use them to reverse engineer the tower's operations. The placement of a hearth on a tower's western side, for example, isn't random. It suggests the prevailing wind was used to carry smoke away from the operator's line of sight to the next tower in the chain eastward. The discovery of specific mineral residues like sulfur or saltpeter in ceramic pots suggests experiments with colored smoke, adding a layer of cryptographic complexity we had only guessed at from texts. Inscriptions carved into tower walls by bored soldiers, once dismissed as simple graffiti, are now being re-examined as potential duty rosters, height measurements for optimal signaling, or even casual notes about the weather that day, providing a priceless human context to the stone and mortar. And now the search for these lost networks is entering a new golden age, propelled by technology that would seem like magic to the ancient builders. Light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, is perhaps the most revolutionary tool. This technology involves flying an aircraft over a forested or overgrown area and firing millions of laser pulses at the ground. These pulses penetrate the vegetation canopy and bounce back, allowing computers to create an incredibly detailed, three-dimensional map of the ground surface below. In places like the jungles of Mesoamerica or the dense woodlands of Europe, LiDAR has revealed the faint, geometric outlines of completely unknown signal towers and fortifications, proving that the networks were far more extensive than we ever dreamed from ground surveys alone. Similarly, satellite imaging and drone photography are allowing archaeologists to see the big picture like never before. By analyzing subtle variations in soil moisture and plant health, these cameras can detect the buried foundations of stone towers that are invisible to the naked eye, a phenomenon known as a crop mark. Drones equipped with high-resolution cameras can map entire mountain ranges in stunning detail, identifying potential tower sites based on their strategic lines of sight. This isn't just about finding new towers, it's about understanding the network's logic. By mapping dozens of newly discovered sites at once, researchers can finally see the full, intricate web of communication, understanding how a message would have been routed across hundreds of miles of complex terrain. Each new discovery adds another node to this ancient web, proving that the ambition of these empires was even greater, and their engineering even more sophisticated than our greatest historians had ever assumed. But for all their astonishing speed and strategic brilliance, the ancient signal towers were not the only players in the game of long-distance communication. Every civilization had its own toolkit of methods, each with unique strengths and crippling weaknesses. To truly appreciate the ingenuity of the tower networks, we need to place them side by side with their contemporaries, the fleet-footed messenger, the resonant drum, and the homing pigeon, and see how they measured up in the critical trifecta of speed, reliability, and complexity. Let's start with the most fundamental and ancient method, the human messenger. Whether a sprinting hemrodromos like the legendary Phadipides who ran from Marathon to Athens, or a mounted courier on the Persian royal road, the runner's greatest advantage was their ability to carry complexity. A messenger could deliver a detailed scroll, an intricate map, or nuanced verbal instructions with perfect accuracy. They were, in effect, walking, talking data storage devices. The trade-off, of course, was agonizingly slow speed relative to a light signal. Even the finest Persian courier, swapping horses at way stations, would take over a week to cover a distance a beacon chain could cross in an hour. They were also vulnerable to every conceivable hazard: bandits, wild animals, injury, or simply getting lost. A signal fire was immutable and instantaneous. A messenger was a single point of failure, a fragile vessel carrying irreplaceable information through a dangerous world. Then we have auditory systems like drum languages or horn blasts, used to spectacular effect in forested regions like Central Africa and the Americas. These methods leveraged sound's ability to bend around obstacles, making them ideal for dense jungles or rugged, mountainous terrain where a line-of-sight visual signal would be impossible. The talking drums of Africa could replicate the tonal patterns of spoken languages, allowing for surprisingly complex messages to be conveyed across many miles. But sound is a fleeting and fickle medium. Its effective range is severely limited, rarely exceeding 10 or 15 miles even under perfect conditions. It is also brutally vulnerable to interference. A strong wind blowing the wrong way, a sudden downpour, or even just the ambient noise of a forest could garble a message beyond recognition or silence it completely. While a tower signal could be seen by multiple stations simultaneously, a drum signal was a linear, one-directional shout into the void, with no guarantee it would be heard or correctly relayed. And what of nature's own messengers like carrier pigeons, used extensively by the Romans, Persians, and later during the Crusades? These birds offered a fascinating blend of reliability and autonomy. Once released, a well-trained pigeon would fly straight to its home loft at impressive speeds, unaffected by terrain below and largely immune to interception. They were living, breathing packets of data, perfect for sending short, critical messages from a besieged city back to headquarters, but their utility was incredibly narrow. They were a one-way system. You couldn't send a message to a specific location, only from it. Their payload was minuscule, limited to a tiny scroll attached to their leg. And they were entirely dependent on the fragile biology of a single animal. A storm, a predator, or simply a bad training day could mean the irrevocable loss of the message. So where does this leave our signal towers? Their supreme advantage was, without question, raw speed. A simple, pre-arranged message of existential importance, an enemy attacking, could outpace any other method by orders of magnitude. They created a persistent network, always on and always watching, unlike a messenger who had to be dispatched or a pigeon that had to be carried to the starting point. But their limitations were just as stark. They were a fair weather friend. Fog, rain, or heavy snow could blind the entire network for days. They were spectacularly bad at nuance, limited to a small vocabulary of coded signals. You could never send a complex treaty or a detailed battle plan via smoke puffs. This is why the most sophisticated empires never relied on a single method. They engineered hybrid, fault-tolerant systems that played to each method's strengths. The Persians provided the masterclass. They used their signal towers for the initial high-speed alert, the brevity code that put the entire kingdom on standby. This alert would race ahead of the physical courier, who was already galloping down the royal road carrying the detailed scroll. By the time the courier arrived, exhausted but with his vital information intact, the court was already prepared to act on the details immediately. The towers provided the shocking speed, and the courier provided the essential context. Similarly, a Roman general on campaign might use signal towers to coordinate the movement of his legions across a broad front with simple commands like advance or retreat, while relying on mounted scouts to deliver more detailed reconnaissance reports back to his command tent. They understood that a robust communication strategy wasn't about finding one perfect technology, but about wisely assembling a suite of tools, creating a resilient network where the weakness of one method was covered by the strength of another, ensuring that the vital flow of information could never be completely severed. Yet for all their resilience and centuries of service, even the most brilliantly engineered systems must eventually yield to the relentless march of progress. The decline of the great signal tower networks was not a sudden collapse but a slow fading, a gradual obsolescence driven by a confluence of technological revolutions, seismic political shifts, and a fundamental change in the very nature of warfare. These stone sentinels, which had once been the pinnacle of communication technology, found themselves outpaced by a new world they helped to create. One of the most decisive factors was the invention and widespread adoption of gunpowder, which fundamentally altered the calculus of military defense and attack. The classic signal tower was designed for an era of border incursions, cavalry raids, and infantry maneuvers, threats that moved at the speed of a horse or a marching man. The arrival of artillery changed everything. Suddenly, armies could strike from miles away, and fortifications, including watchtowers themselves, could be reduced to rubble by cannon fire without an enemy ever coming into view. The early warning that was the tower's primary purpose became less relevant when the first sign of an attack might be the whistle of a cannonball. Furthermore, the nature of war evolved from focused border conflicts to large-scale campaigns involving massive, mobile armies. Commanders were now embedded with their troops in the field, needing real-time tactical communication on the battlefield itself, not strategic alerts from a distant frontier. The slow, directional chain of tower-to-tower signals was ill-suited for the chaotic, fluid nature of gunpowder warfare, where battle lines could shift in minutes. Simultaneously, a new generation of communication technology was emerging that rendered the old methods obsolete. The optical telegraph or semaphore system we discussed earlier was the signal tower's direct and more sophisticated descendant. While it operated on the same line of sight principle, its mechanical arms could convey a vastly more complex vocabulary of messages, including detailed orders and administrative documents, not just pre-arranged emergency codes. For a burgeoning modern state, this capability was infinitely more valuable. Then came the true game changer, the electric telegraph. Its invention in the early 19th century didn't just improve upon visual signaling, it made it utterly redundant. Wires carried messages at the speed of electricity, unaffected by darkness, fog, or storm. A message could now be sent from London to Bombay in hours, not weeks, with pinpoint accuracy and in complete secrecy. The electric network was faster, more reliable, more secure, and capable of handling an infinite volume of traffic. Overnight, the centuries-old reliance on a man standing on a tower squinting at a distant flame became a quaint anachronism. This technological displacement was often accelerated by dramatic political upheaval. The great signal networks were colossal state projects requiring immense centralized power, wealth, and administrative will to build and maintain. When the empires that built them fell, their communication systems were among the first things to decay. The elaborate Roman signal chain along the limes didn't just fade away, it was abandoned as the empire contracted and could no longer afford to pay and supply the troops manning its remote outposts. As Roman authority crumbled, the local knowledge of the codes and maintenance routines was lost, and the towers were left to the mercy of the elements and scavengers seeking pre-cut stone. Similarly, the fall of various Chinese dynasties led to periods of neglect for the Great Wall's beacon system. Without a strong central authority to enforce their upkeep and man them with trained soldiers, the towers fell into disrepair, their function fading into local legend and their strategic value forgotten until a new threat emerged that necessitated their rediscovery and restoration. Yet, to declare the signal tower completely extinct would be a mistake. In remote, inaccessible, or economically marginal regions where stringing telegraph wires was impractical or too costly, the old ways stubbornly persisted. Well into the 20th century, variations of beacon systems were used in parts of North Africa and the Middle East to warn of tribal raids or to coordinate between isolated desert outposts. In the high Himalayas, communities used smoke signals to announce the approach of travelers or to call for help across impassable gorges where no modern technology could yet reach. Perhaps the most poignant and powerful example of their enduring legacy is their use during wartime, even in the modern era. In the 1940s, the British government, fearing a German invasion and the potential collapse of its electrical grid, established a secret backup system known as the Auxiliary Units or Coast Watchers. This network relied on a series of hidden beacons and bonfires, a direct echo of the Elizabethan beacons against the Spanish Armada, to warn of enemy landings should conventional communications fail. This desperate plan was a silent tribute to the timeless reliability of fire and high ground, proving that when all else fails, humanity instinctively returns to its oldest and most fundamental tools for connection. The story of the signal tower's decline, therefore, is not one of total disappearance, but of a brilliant technology receding from the forefront, waiting in the wings for those moments when the complexities of modern life fall away and the ancient, simple need to send a warning cry across the darkness becomes paramount once more. It might seem like a monumental leap from a column of smoke on a distant hill to the invisible torrent of data that flows through our smartphones, but the fundamental architecture of our modern connected world is built upon principles that would feel deeply familiar to a Roman signal operator. The physical medium has transformed from fire and light to fiber optics and radio waves, but the underlying logic of networks, the very blueprint for how we move information across vast distances, was pioneered by those ancient stone towers. Their legacy is not just a historical curiosity, it is the unacknowledged foundation of our digital age, a direct lineage of innovation that connects the beacon fire to the broadband signal. Consider the most basic structural parallel, the concept of a network of nodes. A Roman signal chain was a series of discrete, individual towers, each one a node in a larger system. Each node had a single, critical job: receive a message from the previous node, verify it, and then faithfully retransmit it to the next node in the sequence. This is the absolute core principle of the modern internet. When you send an email from New York to Tokyo, the data packet containing your message doesn't travel through a single, continuous wire across the ocean floor. Instead, it hops from one network node to another, from your home router to a local exchange, through a series of powerful internet backbone routers and across undersea cables, with each node reading the destination address and passing it along the most efficient path. Our global data infrastructure is a planetary-scale version of the Roman limes, with fiber optic cables and satellite links acting as the modern roads, and routers performing the exact same function as the watchman in his tower: receive, verify, and relay. The pace is billions of times faster, but the fundamental relay race structure is identical. This reliance on a chain also introduced a shared critical vulnerability: a single point of failure. If one tower in an ancient chain was overrun by an enemy or collapsed in a storm, the entire communication line for hundreds of miles was severed. The ancient engineers understood this problem intuitively and built in redundancy wherever they could. They often constructed secondary or backup towers on alternative high points, creating optional paths for a message to travel if the primary route was compromised. This concept of building multiple pathways for information is a cornerstone of modern network design, known as redundancy. The entire internet is designed as a mesh network for this exact reason. If a key data center in Chicago goes offline or a transatlantic cable is severed by an anchor, the network's routing algorithms instantly detect the failure and automatically reroute traffic through other nodes in places like Dallas or London, ensuring your video call continues uninterrupted. This robust, self-healing design is a direct digital evolution of the ancient strategist's plan to keep the messages flowing, no matter what. Then there is the matter of language. The ancient signalers didn't just shout, "Hey," into the darkness. They developed sophisticated codes to ensure their messages were both efficient and secure. A series of smoke puffs or a specific number of torches represented complex, pre-arranged meanings, compressing a lengthy report into a simple visual cue. This is the ancient precursor to data encoding and compression, which are the magic behind every digital file we use. When you send a high-resolution photograph, the data isn't transmitted as a raw, gargantuan stream of ones and zeros. It is first compressed using complex algorithms, stripping out redundant information and shrinking the file size into an efficient, coded package, not unlike how a single fire could represent the entire concept of 1,000 enemy troops approaching. At the other end, the data is decoded and decompressed back into the full image. This process of encoding for efficiency and security is what allows us to stream movies and make video calls. It is the modern, mathematical expression of the same drive to convey maximum meaning with minimum signal. Even the physical limitations faced by the ancients still echo in our most advanced systems. Their absolute dependence on a clear line of sight is mirrored in technologies like microwave radio transmission and 5G cellular networks. Vast networks of microwave towers form the backbone of many telephone and data systems, and they must be placed in a direct, visible chain, often on tall buildings or mountain peaks, just like their ancient predecessors. If a new skyscraper is built that breaks the line of sight between two microwave towers, the link fails, creating a modern version of the overgrown forest that blocked a Roman signaler's view. Similarly, 5G technology relies on a dense grid of small cell towers, and their high-frequency signals are easily blocked by walls, trees, and even rain, requiring engineers to solve the same old geographical puzzles with new tools. The constraints of physics are timeless, and our solutions, while technologically magnificent, are still in a constant dialogue with the same fundamental challenges of terrain and visibility. This profound connection is more than just a technological footnote. It is a powerful reminder of a continuous human story. The drive that compelled a Chinese emperor to build a chain of towers across mountains and deserts is the very same drive that led us to launch satellites into geostationary orbit and lay cables across the ocean floor. It is the relentless, universal urge to shrink the world, to defeat isolation, and to connect with one another across any barrier. Every time a packet of data leaps effortlessly from a satellite to your phone, you are experiencing the final, magnificent expression of an idea that was first kindled in a fire basket on a stone tower 2,000 years ago. We are still building signal towers. We have just learned how to make them invisible. Yet for all their resilience against centuries of weather and warfare, the greatest threat to these ancient signal towers has emerged not from conflict, but from the quiet creep of modern progress and the simple, heartbreaking force of neglect. These silent stone sentinels, which once pulsed with the urgent light of empire, now stand as vulnerable archaeological treasures, facing a new battery of enemies: the relentless erosion of time, the expanding footprint of urban development, and perhaps most insidiously, the slow fade into obscurity. But around the world, a dedicated coalition of archaeologists, historians, local communities, and governments is fighting back, launching a multifaceted campaign to preserve these irreplaceable links to our shared past, ensuring that the story of humanity's first internet does not vanish from the landscape or from memory. The front line of this global effort is often the granting of formal protected status. Organizations like UNESCO have begun to recognize signal towers not as isolated ruins, but as integral components of larger World Heritage sites. The most famous example is, of course, the Great Wall of China. While the wall itself has long been celebrated, preservationists now emphasize that its beacon towers were the intelligent nervous system that gave the wall its purpose. Conservation work there is a monumental task, battling the effects of tourism, weathering, and in remote sections, the illegal harvesting of stones for local construction. Teams of experts use a combination of traditional techniques employing master masons who understand ancient mortar recipes, and advanced technology like drone-based mapping to monitor structural stability and plan meticulous, historically accurate repairs. The goal is not to rebuild the entire wall, but to stabilize and conserve what remains, preventing further loss and allowing these towers to tell their story for centuries to come. In Europe, similar endeavors are breathing new life into the Roman frontier networks, along the Rhine and Danube in Germany, and most notably at sites like Hadrian's Wall in the United Kingdom. Preservation is a sophisticated science. Here, the challenge is often biological as much as geological. Teams must carefully remove invasive plant roots that pry apart ancient stonework, treat microbial growth that degrades surfaces, and install discrete drainage systems to divert water away from fragile foundations. The philosophy is one of minimal intervention. The aim is to freeze the decay process, not to create a modern replica. This often means leaving a tower as a stabilized ruin, its original form clearly visible but safeguarded against collapse. This work is supported by a powerful partnership between national heritage bodies and local archaeological trusts, who together fundraise, research, and execute these painstaking projects. Perhaps the most heartening development in preservation is the powerful shift toward community-led initiatives. For generations, a crumbling signal tower on a local hilltop might have been seen as just a pile of old rocks. Today, there's a growing movement to rekindle local pride and ownership of these monuments. In rural Scotland, community trusts have adopted the ancient beacon sites used during the wars with England, clearing vegetation, installing interpretive signs, and even organizing annual walks between them. In Jordan, local Bedouin communities are being trained as stewards and guides for the Nabatean signal towers that dot the desert landscape near Petra, transforming them from passive bystanders into active guardians of their own heritage. This grassroots engagement is vital, as it creates a living connection between the monument and the people who live in its shadow, ensuring its protection is valued long after the archaeologists have packed up their tools. Technology is also providing revolutionary new ways to preserve these sites, even as the physical structures themselves may continue to weather. The emergence of digital archaeology allows for a form of virtual immortality. Using a technique called photogrammetry, specialists can take thousands of overlapping photographs of a tower from every angle, which software then stitches together into a perfect, measurable three-dimensional digital model. Lidar scanning from aircraft can map entire networks hidden under forest canopies, revealing their full scale without disturbing a single stone. These digital twins are more than just backups. They are powerful research tools that allow scholars to study a site from across the globe, and they form the basis for immersive virtual reality experiences that can transport anyone, anywhere, to the top of a windswept tower to witness a recreated signal fire blazing against the night sky. This digital preservation ensures that even if a tower is eventually lost to a landslide or rising seas, its precise record and its story will endure forever. And finally, the most sustainable form of preservation is often through thoughtful, respectful tourism. When done correctly, turning a signal tower site into a destination generates the revenue needed for its upkeep while educating the public. The key is managing the delicate balance between access and conservation. This doesn't mean building gift shops on the ruins. It means creating well-designed footpaths that protect the surrounding archaeology, installing informative panels that explain the tower's function in a compelling way, and training guides who can bring the daily life of an ancient operator vividly to life for visitors. By experiencing these places firsthand, by standing where a Roman soldier stood and seeing the same view to the next tower in the chain, people develop a personal, emotional connection to history. They become invested in its survival, understanding that these aren't just old stones. They are the physical proof of our ancestors' brilliance, perseverance, and universal desire to connect across the vast, silent distances of the ancient world. Despite the incredible wealth of knowledge we've pieced together about these ancient networks, the silent stones of the signal towers still guard some of their most fascinating secrets. For all our archaeological digs and historical analysis, there are profound questions about their daily operation that may never be fully answered, leaving a tantalizing veil of mystery over what it was truly like to maintain the pulse of an empire. One of the most pressing puzzles is the issue of error correction. We know the messages traveled with breathtaking speed, But how did a tower operator know for certain that the signal he was seeing from the distant horizon wasn't a mistake, or worse, a deliberate deception by an enemy? The consequences of a false alarm were catastrophic, potentially mobilizing entire legions for a threat that didn't exist and leaving other frontiers dangerously exposed. Historians hypothesize that verification must have been a multi-step process. Perhaps the initial signal was a simple, generic alert, a single fire lit to grab the attention of the next tower. The receiving operator would then need to respond with a specific acknowledgement signal, a kind of ancient read receipt, before the full, detailed message was sent. This two-way handshake protocol would have ensured that the chain was awake, attentive, and ready to receive the critical information accurately. There's also compelling speculation about the use of redundant signaling. An operator might send the same message twice in quick succession, or use two slightly different methods simultaneously, like a smoke signal paired with a distinct flag pattern, to confirm the message authenticity. This layered approach would have made it exponentially harder for an enemy to spoof the entire system, and would have given the receiving operator the confidence to know that the three fires he saw blazing in the night were a genuine call to arms, and not just a trick of the light or a campfire on a distant hill. Beyond the fear of error, there's the intriguing possibility that these networks engaged in a form of multi-sensory communication that has left little trace in the archaeological record. We are fixated on the visual, the fire and the smoke, because that's what the stones and the texts most clearly describe. But what about sound? In conditions of poor visibility, such as dense fog, heavy rain, or the pitch black of a moonless night, a visual signal could become useless. It seems almost inevitable that backup systems would have been developed. The blast of a horn, the strike of a large drum, or the ringing of a bell could have served as an acoustic beacon, its sound carrying for miles in the still, damp air. A sequence of horn blasts could have conveyed a simple numeric code, similar to the visual signals. While such sounds couldn't carry the same complex information as a multi-fire signal, they could certainly communicate essential binary states: danger or all clear, stand ready or stand down. Finding evidence for this is incredibly difficult, as wood, leather, and animal horn, the materials used to make such instruments, rarely survive millennia. But the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It requires us to use our imagination, to picture a lookout not only straining his eyes into the gloom, but also holding a cupped hand to his ear, listening for the faint, mournful sound of a Laura horn echoing from the next tower through the mist, a sound that meant, "I am here and I am listening." Perhaps the most captivating and least understood mystery revolves around the potential use of celestial navigation and astronomical events within these signaling systems. We know that ancient cultures possessed sophisticated knowledge of the stars, using them for navigation, timekeeping, and religious ceremony. Could this knowledge have been integrated into the operation of the signal towers? One compelling theory suggests that the towers themselves might have been aligned with specific celestial phenomena. A tower positioned so that the rising sun of the winter solstice shone directly along the line of sight to the next station could have used that event as a natural calibration tool, a yearly check to ensure their alignment was true. Furthermore, the appearance of certain stars or planets could have been used as a timing mechanism or even as a code. A signal sent only when the bright star Sirius was visible at a certain altitude above the horizon might have indicated a message of the highest priority, a kind of top-secret designation written in the sky itself. There are even more speculative but fascinating ideas about using the moon's reflection on a body of water as a passive signaling method, or interpreting the sudden appearance of a comet not just as an omen, but as a pre-arranged signal to mobilize. While these concepts stretch into the realm of theory, they challenge us to see these towers not as isolated stone piles, but as potential components in a much larger, more sophisticated dialogue between humanity and the cosmos, a way of syncing the urgent messages of empires with the timeless, predictable rhythms of the heavens. These unanswered questions are not frustrating gaps in our knowledge. They are the very engine that drives archaeology and historical research forward. Every new technological tool, from ground-penetrating radar that can find lost tower foundations to chemical analysis that can identify the unique residue of fuels burned in a signal fire, offers a chance to test these hypotheses and pull back another corner of the veil. The mysteries remind us that the past is not a static painting but a dynamic, living puzzle. They invite us to move beyond the simple facts of what was built and to plunge into the far more complex and human world of how it was used, how it was experienced, and how a system of such breathtaking simplicity could have been managed with such flawless precision that it held the fate of civilizations in its flickering, fiery light. The silent stones have given up many of their secrets, but their most intimate conversations, the whispered protocols between operators, the shared glances confirming a signal, the sigh of relief when the all-clear was given, are lost to the wind, leaving us to listen carefully and imagine the rest. But what if you could step out of the role of an observer and into the worn sandals of an ancient signal operator? What if you could feel the weight of that responsibility, squint against the setting sun to spot a distant flicker of light, and make the split-second decision to light your own fire, setting off a chain reaction that could save a kingdom? Thanks to a fascinating fusion of historical passion and cutting-edge technology, this is no longer a fantasy. A vibrant global movement is dedicated to bringing these ancient networks back to life, not just to study them, but to truly experience them, transforming dusty history into a living, breathing challenge that connects us directly to the past. One of the most powerful ways this is happening is through the meticulous work of historical reenactment groups. Across Europe and parts of the Middle East, dedicated enthusiasts spend months researching, building, and training to operate full-scale replica signal systems. Using historically accurate materials like dry straw and specific resins to create the correct color and density of smoke, or polished bronze shields to mimic heliographs, these groups stage elaborate demonstrations. They position teams on hilltops within visual range of each other, often using the very same sites where ancient towers once stood, and attempt to send pre-arranged messages down the line. The experience is notoriously humbling. Participants quickly learn that theory is nothing compared to practice. A sudden shift in the wind can blow your carefully crafted smoke signal directly into your face, blinding you to the next tower. The angle of the sun can render a mirror signal invisible to its intended recipient. The simple act of creating a large, sustained fire that produces a clear, consistent signal is a physical ordeal requiring constant feeding and vigilance. These reenactments are far more than a show for spectators. They are vital experimental archaeology. Each attempt, whether successful or not, provides priceless data on fuel consumption, signal visibility under various weather conditions, and the very human factors of fatigue and stress that no history book can ever truly capture. For those who cannot trek to a remote hilltop, digital technology offers an incredible portal into this lost world. Software engineers and historians have collaborated to build stunningly detailed digital simulations of entire tower networks. Using geographic information system data, these programs can map the precise line of sight between known tower sites with scientific accuracy. You can pull up a map of Roman Britain and watch a digital message propagate along Hadrian's Wall, with each virtual tower lighting up in sequence. These simulations allow researchers to test theories that would be impossible to try in the real world. What happens to the network speed if a single tower is removed? How does early morning fog in a particular valley impact the entire chain's reliability? This digital sandbox lets us play with history, running countless scenarios to understand the network's strengths and its surprising vulnerabilities in ways that are revolutionizing our academic understanding. The immersion goes even deeper with the rise of virtual reality. Several museums and educational institutions have developed VR experiences that are as close to time travel as we can currently get. You put on a headset and find yourself standing on the wooden platform of a Roman signal tower on a chilly British evening. You can hear the wind whistling around you, see the flickering light of your brazier casting dancing shadows on the wooden railings. In the distance, you see a pinprick of light, a signal from the next tower. Your heart rate quickens as you lean forward, counting the number of distinct flames to decode the message. Then you must turn to your own fuel pile, select the right materials, and use your virtual torch to ignite the signal, ensuring your fire is just as bright and clear before settling back into your watch, scanning a vast digital landscape for the next development. This isn't a passive video game. It's an empathetic engine designed to make you feel the crushing boredom, the sudden adrenaline, and the profound isolation of the role, creating an emotional connection to history that 1,000 textbooks could never achieve. This drive for interactive learning has even found its way into our pockets through innovative mobile applications. Some apps use your phone's camera and augmented reality functionality. You can point your device at a nearby hill or even a city street, and the app will overlay a digital reconstruction of what a signal tower would have looked like on that spot, complete with information about its likely range and connection to the broader network. Other apps turn the signaling process into a puzzle game, challenging you to correctly decode a series of flashing lights or smoke puffs against a ticking clock, teaching the complex coding systems through engaging gameplay. These tools democratize the experience, making the intricate science of ancient communication accessible and fun for everyone, from school children to curious adults on a hike. Ultimately, the power of these interactive recreations, whether physical, digital, or virtual, lies in their ability to close a historical loop. For centuries, we could only guess at the human experience behind these stones. Now we can test those guesses. We can feel the wind that hampered signals, we can struggle with the codes, and we can gain a visceral, gut-level appreciation for the skill, coordination, and sheer human grit that was required to keep an empire informed. It transforms the signal tower from a static ruin into a dynamic, functioning system, and its operator from an anonymous footnote into a relatable person facing a daunting task. This hands-on connection does more than just teach us history. It makes us its temporary custodians, fostering a deeper, more personal commitment to preserving these incredible stories for the generations who will, undoubtedly, find even more amazing ways to experience them. While the monumental systems of Rome and China understandably dominate the historical narrative, the brilliant spark of visual communication was not confined to these two empires. This fundamental human impulse to conquer distance with light and fire ignited independently across the globe, a testament to its universal utility. From the soaring peaks of the Andes to the arid plateaus of Africa, cultures with no possible contact with each other arrived at the same elegant solution, adapting the core principles of the signal tower to their own unique landscapes, threats, and ambitions, proving that ingenuity knows no single geography. In the vast and vertically dramatic empire of the Inca, which stretched along the spine of the Andes Mountains, the challenge of communication was defined by extreme altitude and treacherous terrain. While the Inca are famed for their network of chasqui runners, relay messengers who sprinted between way stations, they also masterfully integrated visual signaling to create a hybrid system of astonishing efficiency. Their solution was the use of hilltop fire beacons, strategically placed on the countless apashitas, or sacred stone cairns, that crowned mountain passes. These were not permanent stone towers in the Roman sense, but utilized natural high points that were sanctified and maintained for this very purpose. The system operated with breathtaking speed, a chasqui carrying a verbal message or a quipu, a complex, not-based recording device, would run to a high pass. If his message was of the utmost urgency, such as a rebellion in a distant province or the approach of Spanish conquistadors, he would not continue running. Instead, he would signal the next way station by creating a large, controlled fire. The watchman at that station would see the distinct plume of smoke against the clear mountain sky, instantly understand the level of alarm, and immediately light his own beacon while simultaneously dispatching a fresh chasqui runner to meet the incoming messenger halfway. This created a dual wave of information, a visual alert that raced ahead at the speed of light to mobilize a response, followed closely by the physical messenger who could provide the crucial details. This ingenious integration allowed the Inca emperor in Cusco to receive word of events on the far northern frontier of his empire in a matter of hours, a feat that would have been impossible for the runners alone. Across the Atlantic, on the other side of the world, another powerful African kingdom was likely employing a similar strategy to manage its own sprawling domain. The Kingdom of Axum, centered in modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, was a major naval and trading power from the 1st to the 8th centuries, controlling commerce between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. Its territory encompassed rugged highlands and a long coastline, necessitating a robust communication system to coordinate its military and protect its lucrative trade routes. While archaeological evidence is still emerging, historians strongly suspect Axum used a network of stone watchtowers and beacon fires. The placement of certain ruined structures on high plateaus and coastal promontories aligns perfectly with the line of sight principle. These towers would have been vital for monitoring Red Sea shipping lanes for both friendly merchant vessels and potential pirate threats. A fire lit on a coastal tower could signal the approach of ships long before they made landfall, giving Axumite officials time to prepare to welcome a valuable trade partner or to muster defenses against a raid. The system would have been the nervous system of their maritime economy, allowing them to project power and protect their wealth across a vast and geographically challenging kingdom, demonstrating that the strategic value of rapid communication was just as critical for a mercantile sea power as it was for a land-based military empire. Journeying further east, we find evidence of sophisticated signaling networks woven into the fabric of ancient Indian kingdoms. References in classical Indian texts like the Artha Shastra, a treatise on statecraft written by the philosopher Chanakya, describe in detail the use of deepa, or lamp signals, for military communication. These were not simple bonfires, but involved complex codes using different types of oil lamps and flags to convey specific messages across distances. The Mauryan Empire, which unified much of the Indian subcontinent in the 3rd century BCE, almost certainly employed such a system to administer its vast territories. Towers were positioned within visual range of each other, often integrated into the walls of forts and citadels that guarded strategic mountain passes and river crossings. The signaling was so precise that, according to the texts, different messages could be sent based on the number of lamps lit, their arrangement, and even the type of flame. This allowed for a surprising level of detail to be transmitted, perhaps indicating the type of troops on the move or the direction from which they were coming. The use of these networks in India highlights a sophisticated bureaucratic approach to empire management, where communication was not just a tool for war, but an essential instrument for daily administration and control, ensuring the emperor's will could be felt instantly in even the most remote provinces. Even in the heart of the Middle East, long before the Persian royal road, evidence points to the use of early signaling methods. The great empires of Assyria and Babylon, renowned for their military might and architectural achievements, likely used fire and smoke signals to coordinate their armies during campaigns across the fertile plains of Mesopotamia. While they lacked the permanent stone towers of the Romans, they would have constructed temporary signal platforms on high ground or used existing temple ziggurats, the massive, stepped pyramids that dominated their cities as commanding vantage points. The flat topography of the region would have been ideally suited for such visual communication, allowing signals to be seen over impressive distances. A message from a forward scout unit spotting an enemy army could be relayed back to the main command tent in minutes, allowing the king and his generals to deploy chariots and infantry with a tactical advantage that often decided the outcome of battles. This practice shows that the concept of rapid military communication is ancient indeed, predating even the classical empires and forming a foundational element of organized warfare itself. Each of these diverse cultures, separated by continents and centuries, arrived at the same profound realization that in the struggle to build and maintain power, information was the ultimate weapon, and the ability to move it faster than anyone else was the key to supremacy. This remarkable technology, which could unite empires and save countless lives, carried within it a profound and timeless ethical dilemma. The very same network that flashed a life-saving warning could also be weaponized to spread a deadly lie. The signal tower was a tool, and like any tool from the simplest hammer to the most complex artificial intelligence, its moral character was defined not by its design, but by the intentions of the hands that wielded it. We've celebrated its capacity for good, but to fully understand its legacy, we must also confront its potential for control, manipulation, and the darker aspects of human nature. The most obvious ethical shadow cast by these networks was their role as instruments of pervasive state surveillance and social control. For the average farmer living near the Roman frontier or a merchant traveling the Silk Road, the ever-present watchtower on the horizon was not just a protector. It was a powerful and constant reminder of the emperor's unwavering gaze. This was a panopticon built of stone and fire, a system designed to see everything, the knowledge that any unusual activity, a large gathering, an unexpected fire, movement at an odd hour, could be instantly reported to a central authority created a powerful chilling effect. It discouraged dissent, enforced conformity, and solidified the power of the state over the individual in a way that was previously impossible. The network that allowed a general to coordinate a defense could just as easily allow a paranoid ruler to monitor his own population for signs of unrest, to crush a rebellion before it could even truly begin. This dual capacity for external defense and internal suppression is a theme that echoes painfully through history, right up to the modern debates surrounding facial recognition technology, digital tracking, and the collection of personal data by governments in the name of national security. This power to observe naturally evolved into a power to manipulate, and history provides us with a stark and unforgettable cautionary tale. The Chinese legend of King Yu of the Zhou dynasty and his concubine Bao Si is perhaps the ancient world's most potent parable about the dangers of misusing a communication system. The king, desperate to amuse his melancholy mistress, made the cataclysmic decision to light the emergency beacon fires for a false alarm. He watched as the signal raced across the kingdom, summoning his loyal feudal lords and their armies who arrived breathless and prepared for war, only to find themselves the butt of a royal joke. The sight of their humiliated confusion finally made Bao Si laugh, but the king had committed an unforgivable sin against the very concept of trust. He had broken the sacred covenant between the signal and its meaning. When a genuine invasion finally came and the beacons were lit in true desperation, the lords, believing it to be another cruel trick, ignored the calls. The capital was lost, the king was killed, and a dynasty fell. This story is more than a fable. It is a profound exploration of how a communication system's ultimate strength, its reliability, is entirely dependent on the integrity of its operators. A single act of reckless deception can poison the entire well of trust, rendering the most powerful technology in the world utterly useless. Drawing a direct line from these ancient ethical quandaries to our own digital age is not just easy, it's unavoidable. The signal towers were the internet of their day, and we are grappling with the exact same fundamental issues, just on a vastly larger and more complex scale. The fire beacons that could spread a lie and topple a kingdom are the direct ancestors of the social media algorithms that can amplify misinformation and destabilize modern democracies. The state surveillance enabled by the watchful eyes in the towers finds its parallel in the data collection practices of tech giants and governments, who can now track our movements, our purchases, and our associations with a precision that ancient emperors could never have dreamed of. This forces us to a critical realization that is as uncomfortable as it is essential. The ethical burden does not lie with the technology itself. A signal fire is neither good nor evil, it is simply a flame. The moral responsibility rests squarely on us, the creators, the operators, and the users of these systems. The ancient builders understood they were creating a tool of immense power, and with that power came an immense responsibility to establish protocols, to vet operators, and to protect the system's integrity. We face the same responsibility today. It is up to us to demand transparency from our digital platforms, to advocate for laws that protect privacy without compromising security, and to cultivate a personal media literacy that allows us to discern truth from falsehood. The story of the signal towers teaches us that a connected world is not inherently a better world. It is simply a world with greater potential for both incredible good and unimaginable harm. Our challenge then and now is to choose wisely, to build not just smarter networks, but wiser societies to wield them. The silent stones of these ancient networks have given up many of their secrets, but the most profound revelations may still lie ahead, waiting for the right key to unlock them. Far from being a closed chapter in archaeology, the study of signal towers is exploding into a new golden age, propelled by a revolution in technology and a radical shift towards collaboration that is blurring the lines between disciplines. We are no longer just digging with trowels, we are probing the past with artificial intelligence, decoding ancient environments through genetic science, and modeling entire lost landscapes in virtual space. This isn't just about adding footnotes to history anymore. It's about completely rewriting our understanding of how these ancient internets functioned and how they fundamentally shaped the rise and fall of civilizations. One of the most thrilling frontiers is the application of artificial intelligence and complex computational modeling. For decades, archaeologists could only hypothesize about why a tower was built on a specific hilltop. Was it the absolute highest point, or was it chosen because it offered the best compromise between visibility and defensibility? Now, researchers are feeding vast datasets, detailed topographic maps, historical weather patterns, and the precise coordinates of every known tower into machine learning algorithms. These AI systems can analyze millions of potential sightlines in minutes, identifying the optimal network pathways that would have maximized efficiency and speed. They can run thousands of simulations, testing how a single downed tower due to a storm or an attack would have impacted the entire network's resilience. This allows historians to move beyond guesswork and understand the strategic genius behind these placements with a level of mathematical precision that was previously unimaginable, revealing the sophisticated operational logic that guided ancient engineers. Meanwhile, in the quiet labs of archaeobotanists and geneticists, another quiet revolution is underway, focused on the very materials that made the signals possible. By applying advanced genetic sequencing techniques to the ancient layers of ash and charcoal found in the hearts of signal towers, scientists can now identify the exact species of wood, the specific types of straw, and even the kind of animal dung that was burned to create those iconic smoke plumes. This isn't just academic curiosity, it's a window into ancient resource management and even cryptographic practices. The discovery of specific plant residues like certain resins or oils could prove the use of colored smoke for complex coding. Analyzing the mix of fuels can tell us if operators had access to managed woodlots or if they had to scramble to gather whatever was at hand, revealing the logistical challenges they faced and the economic investment the state was willing to make in maintaining this vital network. This new era of discovery is fundamentally driven by a collapse of the traditional walls between academic fields. The lone historian in a dusty archive has been joined by the data scientist, the software engineer, the geographic information systems specialist, and the materials scientist. This interdisciplinary dream team approaches a single signal tower not as an isolated ruin, but as one node in a vast dynamic system. A historian's translation of a forgotten text might provide a clue about a specific signaling code. An engineer can then calculate the fuel load required to produce a flame visible from the necessary distance. A data scientist can model how that code would have propagated through the network under different seasonal conditions. Together, they can build a holistic, living model of the entire system, understanding it not just as a collection of stones, but as a functioning telecommunications grid. The ultimate goal of all this collaborative, high-tech research is breathtakingly ambitious: to move beyond understanding how the networks worked and towards understanding how they influenced history itself. As we build more accurate models of their speed and reliability, we can start to ask revolutionary questions. Did the superior communication network of Rome directly contribute to its ability to maintain a larger empire for longer than its rivals? Could the rapid warning of a Mongol invasion via China's beacon towers have saved a dynasty by giving it those extra few critical days to mobilize? By precisely dating the construction and abandonment of towers through new methods like cosmogenic nuclide dating, we can create a timeline of imperial control and collapse with unprecedented accuracy, directly linking the health of the communication network to the health of the state itself. The future of this research promises not just to fill in gaps in our knowledge, but to illuminate the very rhythm of ancient history, showing us how the flicker of a single flame on a distant hill could, quite literally, change the world. As our exploration of these ancient signal towers draws to a close, we are left with a profound sense of connection to the innovators who first dared to shrink their world with nothing but fire, smoke, and unwavering human resolve. We have stood alongside the Roman sentry on a windswept frontier, felt the weight of his vigil, and shared in his relief as his signal was answered by a pinprick of light in the distance. We have decoded the sophisticated language of smoke from the Great Wall, understanding how a simple number of plumes could set an entire imperial army into motion. We have traced the incredible relay across the Aegean Sea that saved an empire and marveled at the hybrid genius of the Persian network that married speed with stunning detail. This was not merely a story of technology, but a sweeping saga of human ambition, a testament to our species' relentless drive to overcome the barriers of distance and isolation. The legacy of these stone sentinels is not confined to the history books. It is etched into the very architecture of our modern lives. Every time a packet of data hops seamlessly from a satellite to your smartphone, you are witnessing the final, magnificent expression of an idea first kindled in a fire basket 2,000 years ago. The fundamental principles they pioneered, the network of relay nodes, the need for redundancy, the encoding of complex messages into simple signals, and the constant battle against geographic and atmospheric challenges are the very bedrock of our global internet, our cellular networks, and our satellite communications. We are still building signal towers. We have simply learned how to make their light invisible, to send it through glass fibers and across the radio spectrum. The ancient operator ensuring his fire was bright enough to be seen is the direct ancestor of the network engineer optimizing a server's bandwidth today. Their struggle is our struggle, their triumph is our connected world, yet this incredible journey also leaves us with a crucial and enduring responsibility. The story of King Yu and the lost Zhou dynasty is a timeless warning that echoes in our own digital age. A communication network's greatest strength is its reliability, and its greatest vulnerability is the trust of its users. The same tools that can spread life-saving information can also weaponize lies with terrifying speed. The watchful gaze of the Roman tower, meant for external defense, could easily turn inward, becoming an instrument of control and surveillance. As we navigate our own complex information landscape, with its challenges of misinformation, data privacy, and digital divides, we must carry forward the lessons of the past. The ethical burden does not lie with the technology itself, be it a flame or a fiber optic cable, but with us, the creators, the operators, and the users. We must strive to be worthy stewards of this powerful inheritance, using our global network to build bridges of understanding, to foster empathy, and to share knowledge, ensuring that the human connection it facilitates ultimately leads to a wiser and more united world. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey to the high places where history was written in light. We hope you'll carry a piece of this story with you, and perhaps the next time you send a message across the globe in an instant, you'll take a moment to appreciate the ancient echoes in that modern miracle. If you've enjoyed unraveling this mystery with us, please share your own thoughts and reflections in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And if you're eager for more adventures into the hidden corners of history, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next exploration.